as I am the soldier and poet. Yes, tell this to all the world.
Hello, and welcome to the Bad Sound School podcast, the podcast that aims to help you improve your podcast and gets into the lifestyle and struggles of podcasters. This is your host, Veronica. I'm the social media branding and content strategies for the Bad Sound School. And in this episode, I'm going solo. No Studio Steve. I'm free. So I'm going to be talking about the things that you should be focusing on to make your podcast a total success. And the reason why I decided to record this episode was because this is one of the topics that podcasters search the most online. They ask questions like, how do I know if my podcast will be successful? How can I be successful in podcasting? This is something that we all wonder about when we start a podcast. And although it's very difficult to predict the future, in this episode, I will cover some of the factors that can contribute to having a successful podcast. Okay, so let's get to it. I get it. You want to know if your podcast idea will be successful. You want to know if it's worth your time, energy, and money. But like any other project, there's a risk involved in starting something new. However, in every situation or a new project we go into, including launching a podcast, there are things we can do to minimize the risk and increase our chances of success. So here are the things that, in my humble opinion, and I've been doing this for a while, will help you determine the success of your podcast. But wait a minute, before I get into these important factors, I would like us to talk about success. What is the definition of achieving success with your podcast? What does having a successful podcast mean? Being successful at something is deeply attached to our goals and expectations. The definition of having a successful podcast for me may not be the same for you. For some people, having a successful podcast means having millions of downloads and become the next Joe Rogan. For other people, success is measured by the number of leads and sales their podcast is generating, and they really don't care about their podcast becoming mainstream. Other people may think that having a successful podcast is being able to entertain and give back to their communities and help their audiences in some way. Other people may measure podcasting in terms of networking opportunities coming from having guests on their shows. So this is why it's important from the beginning of our journey to have those goals and expectations clear in our minds. So sit down in front of your computer and start typing the goals and expectations you have for your podcast. It doesn't matter what they are. It doesn't matter how crazy they are. Just write them down and keep moving forward towards your goals. Okay, now let's get to the real factors that may determine your success in podcasting. And make sure that you listen until the end because I'm saving the most important factor to the end of this episode. Okay, the first factor or two factors, I compounded them into one. Our audience and topic. Listen, you want to know if the topic of your podcast is in high demand, meaning that your topic will have listeners and ultimately super fans. Even if you're creating your podcast just as a hobby, knowing that we have people listening every week is our ultimate goal as podcasters. Knowing that we're providing value, entertainment, and potentially changing and inspiring people's lives for the better is kind of like what podcasting is all about. You don't want to create a podcast about a topic your audience doesn't care about. The secret to success is to find a topic or a list of topics people in your niche are interested in, and also learning about your audience and what they need and want. This is why it's so important to do topic research and create an ideal listener profile. This doesn't have to be a complicated task. and add as many details as you can when you're describing your ideal listener. There are many different online tools and public forums you can use to do your topic research. You can simply start typing your topic in the search bar on Google and see what auto-populates. This will give you an idea of what people are searching for regarding your topic online. There are also keyword research services like Ubersuggest and Answer the Public that will generate reports of what people are searching for online. And yes, they are free. You can also use public forums and Facebook groups and ask questions and interact with people directly and ask them questions. Okay, so let's move on to the second factor that has a big impact on your podcast success, and that is the quality of your content. The three main areas that determine the quality of your podcast are writing and structuring, audio production, and performance. These are all three crazy importance for your success. So let's talk about all three. Número uno, writing and structuring your episodes. Here we want to think about the way we'll be presenting the information to the listener. If your show is in a storytelling format, are you presenting the story in a way to keep your audience at the edge of their seats until the end of the episode? If your show is educational, are you organizing your episodes in a way that is easy to understand, digest, and follow? If your show is interview style, are you bringing guests your audience is interested in to talk about topics that they care about? I recommend planning and outlining your episodes and information, always having your audience in mind. Even though podcasting is a medium of audio, you will be doing a lot of writing and planning so your episodes are purposeful and always on point. And the main reason why we want to plan and structure our episodes is to stay away from long-winded episodes without a payoff for your audience at the end. Número dos. The audio production of your podcast is also a significant factor in the quality of your content. Podcasting is a medium of audio, and therefore audio quality is important. Nobody wants to listen to a podcast that sounds like the host is inside of a pod, or a podcast that mixes too loud or too low. The quality of your recordings will add or take away from your listener's experience. Your episodes can be packed full of great information, but if your listeners drop out after a few minutes because how horrible your audio is, it defeats the whole purpose, which is to keep your listeners engaged until the end and keep them coming back for more. So even if you're thinking about outsourcing your podcast editing, it's always a good idea to learn about audio production. Also, there are quick fixes you can do to your recording area or studio that will significantly improve your audio quality. So pay attention to your recording area as well. And finalmente, número 3, let's talk about performance, baby. And when I say performance, I'm not saying that you have to create a persona or alter ego and start talking in a radio voice like this. No. Not at all. What I'm talking about is your personality and unique way to connect with your audience. In a recent poll I found in one of the podcast communities on Facebook, members were asked what was something that they valued the most in a podcast. And the majority replied the host personality. And this is so true. You may encounter that there are other podcasts covering similar topics as your topic. But the difference between their podcast and your podcast is you. It's your personality, your humor, your storytelling skills, your accent, the way you see the world, the way you analyze and perceive a topic, your point of view, your voice, your laugh, and all the things that set you apart. So go ahead and show your personality as much as you can. And my lovely Potsky, and as I promised, I left the most important factor for the end, and in my opinion is exposure. If you're an influencer or have a big social media following and you can leverage it to give your podcast a lot of exposure, you are in a good place, my friend. But some of you, ourselves included here at the Pod Sound School, don't come into podcasting with a big audience eager to start listening to us in audio form. We have to hustle to give our podcast exposure and to bring new listeners. Podcasting is a medium and not a platform like YouTube or social media platforms with built-in algorithms helping small creators like us to gain exposure. The podcast players like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts are taking steps towards helping independent podcasters to be suggested to other users on those platforms. But they're not quite there yet. So what do we do to bring more eyes and ears to our podcast? We use social media and other platforms to engage with our listeners and promote our podcast. We do whatever it takes. Podcast promotion is just as important as podcast production or more. You don't want to get in the hamster wheel of creating podcast episodes every week without taking the time to promote those podcasts. We don't want to spend all that time and good content and not promote it at all, and people won't be able to find it. Ultimately, it doesn't matter if you create an ear candy if nobody knows your podcast even exists. This is why it's so important to bake in the time to create promotional assets like audiograms and promo videos and to post on social media frequently. And not only that, you should have a social media strategy for your podcast that will help you grow your audience faster. Okay, friend, and the last thing I want to tell you, by the way, thank you for staying with me until the end of this episode, is that sometimes the only way to know if we'll be successful at something is to jump headfirst and start doing the thing. I can guarantee you, you will never regret starting your podcast. Podcasting will change you, take you out of your comfort zone, and will bring wonderful opportunities for growth. And all the way, I'm here for you to support you and help you along your journey. So stay in touch with me. Make sure you slide into my DMs on Instagram. I try to reply to all my DMs over there. Share this episode and make sure you rate and review our podcast. And before you go, 2 things. No olviden hacer la tarea and keep creating. Happy casting, friends.